Kia ora everyone, kia ora ita iwi. I ko Shannon Wong toko ingoa kei Aotearoa taku mahi. I'm really excited to welcome you to our first summer Involve webinar. And what a great one to start off with, to be honest. So first off, I'm just going to start up with a karakia, and you're welcome to join in anywhere that you're zooming in from in your little Zoom place. So here we go. Ka inoi tātou. Whakataka te hau ki te uru. Whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina kina ki uta. Kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi aki ana te atakura. He tio, he huka, he hohu, ti he mauri ora. So first off, what I'm going to do, let's spotlight my face for you. My name's Shannon. I work for Aotearoa, the peak body for youth development. I use she, her pronouns. I'd like to invite you to pop yourself into the chat there. Awesome humans already, including our good friend and colleague, Bethany. Please introduce yourself in the chat. We also have the question and answer down the bottom there as well. So just a reminder that this is being recorded. We will be distributing these so that you can hear from the awesome speakers that we have. Again, we will have a kind of time at the end, but with our awesome presenters, Donna and Emma, they'll just take you through some questions and answers that you might like to ask them. So please do feel free to pop those into the question and answers. I'll be monitoring the chat, so if any questions or comments or statements and stuff are in there, I'll make sure that they're forwarded on to Donna and Emma. So without further ado, I am super excited to invite Donna and Emma onto the stage Zoom video. That'd be awesome if you can unmute and pop your videos up there. Okay, and I'm going to spotlight you right now. So Donna and Emma are from the Office of the Children's Commissioner. The Office of the Children's Commissioner is focused on ensuring Aotearoa is a place where all children can thrive. And we're really lucky to hear from them today about their Life in Lockdown report. So I'm going to turn off my vid and I'm going to ask you to take it away.
Kia ora.
What did we do? Oh, so tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Donna Provoost aho. I'm Donna Provoost and I'm the Director of Strategy, Rights and Advice at the Office of the Children's Commissioner. And I've been here for quite a while. I've been here over 8 years and really fantastic job and love what we do here to support children, young people. And I also have with me Emma.
Kia ora, ko Emma Hope aho. I've been with the Office of the Children's Commissioner for just on 5 years, and I predominantly have worked in the My World Child and Youth Voices team, so making sure that children and young people get a say in those matters that affect them.
So we're really excited to talk to you today about our report, Life in Lockdown. And we're going to give you a little bit of an overview of what we heard, but it's not the whole thing, and we'll still urge you to go and download the report and have a look-see. There might be some interesting things there for you. So New Zealand has 1.1, now it's 1.18, so almost 1.2 million children under 18, about a quarter of the population. And there's children under that age don't have the same access to resources, to decision making as other population groups. So that's why we have a children's commissioner, to make sure that we advocate for them in different forms of decision making and make sure that their voices are heard. For those of you who haven't met him before, the man on the screen there is our boss. That's Judge Andrew Beecroft, the current children's commissioner. And so we have a role to monitor how well children are doing, particularly for those in youth justice and care and protection system, monitoring their experiences. We advocate for children's rights interests. We try to influence on their behalf legislation, policy, and practice for their best interests. And we support children's voices to be heard. And that's so that it's within that mandate that we've gathered and are, I guess, amplifying what they've shared with us. When we try to take a child-centered approach on all our work, we hear the evidence and information from academic, from research, other forms of evidence, including other community stakeholders like yourself. We take a child's rights view and frame over it. And then we also listen to the voice of children, young people, and feel that's a really important component for us to take a child-centered lens on our work. So back in March last year, wow, did we all have a new experience? This year, oh, it's still 2020, sorry. Did we all have just such an incredible experience? And there was a lot of emphasis then about dealing with the initial needs and the stresses that families and communities were facing. And there was really not a great focus on children other than through the education system saying, you know, let's extend their term break a little and then scramble to see what we could do to get them back into online learning or learning packages. And the focus for children was really about how do we continue their learning, not actually how they were doing during the lockdown. So we also knew that there were quite a lot of other groups that were surveying children and young people from their own perspectives, and particularly looking at problem areas to see, are they doing okay? And so we wanted to take a different perspective, say, what is the overall experience that children and young people had? What is it that children and young people experienced, good and bad? What can we learn from that? And just take an open view on hearing from them and getting those unfiltered views or voices. So this quote on the screen is great. It's one of the young people said, what they'll always remember is how frontline workers sacrifice their health for us in their community and put themselves and their family at risk. And I guess I wanted to share this because we truly think that this is a 13-year-old girl, but the voices they share are really articulate, they're thoughtful, and empathetic to others. And so all the bubbles you see here are voices that we also share in the report. Over to you, Emma.
Thank you. So we already knew that we wanted to do some sort of a survey, and so as soon as we knew that New Zealand was going to face-to-face learning and that we were moving to a level 2 situation, we contacted the around 100 schools from throughout New Zealand who had participated in the really huge online survey that we did in 2018 as part of our What Makes a Good Life engagement. We deliberately picked those schools because they had been chosen at the time to be a roughly proportional representation of where students are in New Zealand. And of those schools, we got about 24 schools who participated in the survey. We got lots more who said that they really would have loved to have participated, but they were doing their own surveys, or that the timing just wasn't right for them. Aotearoa also supported us to promote the survey out to through some of their youth group networks, and we had a small handful of youth groups who also took part. So you can see on the graph, students were aged there between 8 and 18, came from all throughout New Zealand, both rural and urban. And the gender respondents graph, I've put it on there because it correlates quite nicely with our other previous engagements as well, where when we asked the question about is there another gender or would you rather not say, we generally get about 5% of the respondents who are choosing that as an option. Just putting this on here as the breakdown of the schools by decile. I think it's also a good point in the presentation to really acknowledge that there were some limitations to this engagement. When we do engagement with the Office of the Children's Commissioner, we always want to do that face-to-face engagement to be able to really reach into those groups who might not otherwise want to take part or be able to take part in an online survey, or who weren't engaged in the school system, obviously because of the level 2. Unfortunately for this particular survey, that wasn't a possibility. The decile 10 wasn't necessarily a whole lot of decile 10 schools. It was one super keen one. So for each of the schools, we said somewhere between 50 and 100 students would be great. We had one school who said, this is a great survey and we really support the issue. So we've got all of our year 9s and 10s to complete the survey, which was really cool, but also gave us quite a few conversations to work through how we kind of mitigated that. So you'll see later in this presentation and in the report that we use a weighting system which was created for us by the Centre for Children and Families Research at Victoria University, which to try and kind of balance out the different deciles. And there's, yeah, that's pretty much that one. So we asked the question, was life better or worse or about the same during COVID-19 lockdown than it was before or after? And as you can see, that for most young people, it was about the same, that 42%. There was slightly more, that 29% who said it was either better or much better. And then those who felt it was worse or much worse, which is at 23%. The something else category often included comments like it was both good and bad. I think I've got an example on the next. So this one here, you know, being able to stay home was good, but I miss my friends. So it's sort of in the middle. So they couldn't pick a good or a bad because there was good parts and bad parts. And I think that sums up really well lockdown for a lot of people, that it wasn't just all good or all bad. It was a mixture of everything. We asked this relationships question as an open-ended question. So we asked, how have your relationships with your family changed for better or worse as a result of lockdown? And we then coded the responses for those kind of survey nerds in the audience. It fit really easily into these categories pretty well. And I think there's a few others themes, but for the most part, it fit into it was better, there was no change, it was worse. It was a bit of good and bad. So in there, you can see overwhelmingly, 77% thought their relationships had either changed or stayed the same, with 46% thinking it had improved, and only 6% saying it got worse. And good and bad sometimes factored into different family relationships when we looked at the words. So they might have found that their relationships with siblings improved, but their parents didn't improve, or vice versa. Relationships with family also factored really heavily into responses to the questions where we asked about their positives and negatives, which we'll go on. And these are some of the things that we heard about relationships. One of the themes which stuck with me when I was doing the analysis is that there was quite a few comments who were saying it was better, we had a lot of arguments, or we seemed like we might have fought more, but actually I think we understand each other better now, or we were able to keep talking something through until we got to a point where we've come to a better understanding. So I think that's that top one you can see there. It was stressful at times, but we worked things out. So I suppose our relationships are better. And I think it was just a really interesting thing about that, having more time to spend together.
Right, and yeah, and so we explicitly asked them to tell us, what do you think was one positive thing for you about the lockdown? And it was really interesting, and it's actually a theme that comes up a lot when we ask children, young people, what's important or what's good in their life, and that family relationships. So about a third of children, young people really talked about the positive thing about COVID being about strengthening their relationships, having time with their parents, enjoying time with their parents. Who would have thought? And I mean, that's a great thing. We'd heard before in different surveys that children, young people saying, I wish I had more time with my parents to get their advice, to spend more time with them. Then we gave it to them and they said, I love it. And so that's a really positive thing that came out, that they saw that as a really good thing in their lives. They also talked about things like having more control over their time and time to explore different interests, and that autonomy and not being pressured about get up, go to school, go to after school activities, take care of your siblings, whatever, and then, you know, eat supper, go to bed, repeat. Actually being able to have more control over their time was a huge advantage that they talked about throughout a number of their different responses. Learning new skills and a hobby. You know, we all went to grocery stores and saw that the yeast in the baking aisle was sold out continually, and a lot of people were learning new skills, baking with their family, doing arts and crafts and things that they had just never done before. So fantastic. And being able to learn from home and not have the stress of attending school were some of the things we heard. So quotes there, spending time alone was great, and indulging hobbies. How nice it was to have some me time. Love spending time with family because I feel I could relate to them more than I could before. So some fantastic things that people gave us the rationale behind those answers. And then we asked them, but tell us what was one negative thing. And it's the mere response then of when relationships were the positive, relationships were also the negative. But in this time, they talked about missing the people who were outside their bubble, and they're particularly talking about their friends and some other family that were outside the bubble. And then they also talked about the relationships in terms of some really tough dynamics. Some young people, well, annoying siblings, that goes without saying, but some young people talked about being in situations where their parents were about to split, but they had to stay together during lockdown, and it was really awkward, and it was really hard having people in the household that and not having those breaks when they normally would have. So some of the dimensions there. Mental health challenges, boredom, lack of motivation, anxiety, depression. These are really serious things that we heard about. And also some kids feeling let down about canceled events and well, no takeaway, let's open, but some children, young people talked about, I was supposed to have dancing competitions or my training for my sports and different extracurricular activities that they were missing out on. But at the same time, they also later said, I missed out on that, but it gave me more time to do new things. So really had some great and thoughtful responses to those. Here's some of their quotes. I was meant to be doing a lot of traveling with dance there and missed out, but my parents worked, then slept, so didn't get to hang out with them like other families. And so that's a reality that whether they were in the house or not, some people's parents were working quite a lot. So while some talked about having this extra time with them, certainly some young people didn't have that luxury, and they themselves had to pick up some of the slack about caring for siblings and missing friends, etc.
Obviously, children and young people's learning was a big concern with schools closed for such an extended period. It was a bit of an experiment and something that hadn't been done for many years, of having to close schools and have remote learning or anything like that. And the first time in the kind of data age. Government sought obviously to provide some devices and hard copy learning materials to those that they knew might be disconnected, but it was always challenging to distribute. And we heard that some arrived late and some didn't arrive at all until after the lockdown had finished. So knowing all that background, we asked this question, which was, we asked them, of the following responses, can you rate which one you think most applies to you? So we're worried that I was behind and I won't catch up. I'm worried I'm behind, but I think I'll catch up. I think it's about where it should be. And I feel like I've really gotten ahead in my learning. So positively, I think like nearly 48% feel like their learning was where it should be. And a quarter thought that they were behind, but that they were confident that they would catch up. What's interesting that we've been thinking about for the two ends, so the 8%, which is the obviously really concerning part, which is that they're worried about their learning and they won't catch up. These are the young people who were in school on the day that the survey took place. So it's not even looking at those young people that we know who are already exiting school, who are into the workforce from the lockdown, which we are aware is this whole other issue. At the other end of the spectrum, the other thing we found really interesting is that 18%, so it's nearly 1 in 5, who feel like by having 7 weeks or 4 weeks or after of term learning remotely, they feel like they've gotten ahead in their learning. And for us, that really raises the question of what is it about that remote learning experience that they feel that they got so much more out of that they don't get at school. And we think it's a really interesting a really interesting little stat there that I think probably needs to be considered more from the education kind of side of things. these are some of the comments here. So lots of young people really appreciated being able to prioritise their own time. So they possibly spent more time doing the topics that they enjoyed or they felt they excelled in, and less time doing things that they didn't, or vice versa maybe. And also that thing of being able to get to do what they, you know, being able to do school in their own time, so doing it at 10:30 instead of 8:30. And the survey that in the big bubble in the bottom left is I got to do what schoolwork when I wanted. I didn't have to do stupid surveys, and that's possibly one of my favourite quotes from all of the surveys that I've done. So I've just thrown that one in there too.
Right, so this is a pretty crowded slide, but I hope you can see it because it's really important. We asked children, young people, about their experience of their own well-being at that point in time. And so we had 18 different statements that relate to elements of their well-being. And we'd asked these previously in 2018, so we wanted to ask them again. And they're things like, I feel I belong at school, I have a warm, dry home to live in, I can go to the doctor when I need to. And as I said, these all relate to different elements of well-being that we are aware of and want to map back. And so we said, how do you agree to disagree that this statement reflects your life now? And overall, the responses were generally very positive, and more positive than I'd have to say that we expected in testing these. And also compared to the questions when we asked the same questions to different students 2 years ago, the responses in 2020 were more positive. So we had more positive descriptions of their own sense of their well-being after the lockdown and a pandemic, when, you know, we had every reason to believe this could be a really challenging time. The exception to this is the question that says, I can cope when things get hard. Now, this question, not only is it the lowest rating where they agree that they can cope, with 57% saying agree or strongly agree with that statement. So this is the lowest rated of all the questions. And it's also the one that has dropped the most significantly, has the largest drop since the responses in 2018. So the most negative change. And I think that this is really concerning. And this was particularly true for secondary school students, and it was particularly across all deciles. And actually, both, while it was significant at about an 8% lower rate for lower decile, it was 13% lower for higher decile. So this is actually a new thing that we think needs to be looked into a little, and asking questions like this gives us good barometer as to where things are going. The coping when it gets hard is obviously a measure of their mental well-being. And it actually lines up well with what we're hearing from the Youth 19 survey about the doubling of levels of anxiety, depression, and issues for young people. So it's an area that we're going to continue to look at and really try to get to the bottom of how to support it. But it also triggers again that everyone's experience was not the same, and that we have to be mindful of those differences. So some of the overall comments that we heard, particularly around that, is it was really lonely, man. I felt I couldn't talk to people. I was worried a lot. I did a lot of research online, a lot of anxiety kind of there, felt overwhelmed. And a blur of the days all came together in anxiety and actually socializing during it. So some of examples of how people describe their level of mental well-being during this time. And as I say, something that we want to continue to look at and see how do we support.
And I was just going to throw in there as well, in our report, which is available online, we go into a whole lot more detail looking at the comparison from the 2018 data set to the 2020, and also breaking it down by decile. So there's a whole heap of really interesting stuff in there that we won't go into today, but we encourage you to have a read.
Great.
So from all of the responses we got to the questions, once we'd looked at everything and really broken it out, there was 5 really key insights that really popped out for us. And as we went through, we kind of considered them and what the possible policy implications could be as well. So the first one you can see there on the screen is that COVID-19 lockdown had a range of different impacts on the children and young people we heard from. There was both positives and negatives, and I think it's important to recognise them both.
And for that, then we're saying, well, what's the policy implication? It's one that we really need to understand and listen to the experience of children in these things, but also we need to then look at the diversity of experiences that different children, children with disabilities, children with anxiety or depression or mental health considerations, part of the LGBTI community, those in rural, remote areas. Tamariki Māori, different children and the circumstances and their living arrangements, you really had quite different experiences, and we would need policy responses to treat them quite differently.
So the second one, which really came up a lot, even just in this presentation, is that thing about relationships being critical and the impact of lockdown on those relationships with both friends and family. And they were both positive and negative. They were really significant for those children and young people.
And we were thinking on that, like, what do we do to maintain some of the gains that we had? Some of the really positive things about more time, less rushed, more time with family. And some of that speaks to looking at our structures of the workplace and hours of work and things like that. But there are also things that we can do within our families, within our communities and schools about putting less pressure and less, I guess, demands on children, young people's time, and letting them have some autonomy and control over it. And what would that look like?
Yes, that's that third one of children, young people enjoying having control over their time, having
Getting
more free time,
and
having opportunities for new activities. It came through really strongly about that, that control over time and being able to decide. And there's a lot of research around, I'm just speaking over now, around that kind of the circadian rhythms of those adolescents are different to adults, and to actually recognize that in the education systems and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Is there anything else on there?
No, that's good. That's good.
Then we go on to the changing nature of education was unsettling for some and yet seen as an opportunity for independence by others.
And I think that speaks to when 18% of the children that responded to this said, I did better without showing up to school. That really should challenge us to say, how is school not meeting their needs, that they met them better on their own? And so I think there's a real challenge there to think of what individual learning actually looks like and how we support that flexibility. The other thing that also came through, though, is around the digital divide, and that devices for electronic devices and technology are not just a nice to have, but they're a necessity of life now, and they're a necessity of learning that we need to look at how all young people have access.
Definitely. And the final one is that the improvements in wellbeing really varied across the children and young people we heard from, and that really it correlates with, I think, all of those other surveys that were done at the same time, and everything we know about the variations in those experiences.
Particularly related to inequalities and poverty and the different situations in households.
Which is a great plug for our child poverty monitor.
Yes, which is going to be released this afternoon. Yeah, it is, I should say, December 2nd now, because this might be played later.
Yes. And this is a final quote, I think, that we've really got to finish on. So as weird as it was, I did make a lot of funny memories with my family, and a big highlight was doing workouts with my dad and sister almost every day. Also going on long walks with my whole family in the weekend was a big highlight, and I enjoyed it a lot because we're all growing up now and we don't always get to spend quality time together doing something we all like to do. As you can see, we don't actually amend the quotes as they come in to add punctuation or any sorts of other things. Makes it a little tricky to read out loud.
Sometimes. So we'll just unshare that. Stop share.
Yep.
And have a look and see
some questions.
If we got any questions here to look at. What happens to your report now? How will the recommendations be made to government or community? Well, one of the things that we'll be doing, so far we've just done what we call a soft launch. We've put it on our website and we've shared it with some of people that we knew were particularly waiting in the COVID recovery space and doing policy responses. So we've certainly shared it there. We will be doing more with this to share it in the next week with relevant ministers and attaching that and giving them their own copy, and with a kind of a call to action related to their own area of action. And yeah, so we'll look at this and we don't just end it and put it online. We make sure we kind of squeeze the lemon and amplify and share those voices to different decision makers. I talked about this a couple days last weekend. I was up and did a school board trustee mini conference and sharing the results relative to education with that group, and they were really interested. So we have lots of channels. We'll continue to push this report through. Emma, what's the next question?
I can respond to the next one. So the question is, were there any comments that raised serious concerns about children or young people's safety, and how did you deal with that? So really interesting question, and something that we always have in the back of our minds. And we didn't in this one get any comments that raised serious concerns, but we, in the past, when we have, or our kind of method process is, young people know that it's anonymous, so that we tell them at the start of the survey that what they say won't ever, no one will know they said what they said, and that it's voluntary for them to take part. And also those sorts of things that we ask. If we have gotten comments that we think, oh, that's a little bit worrying, we can see which school it is, and we can go back to the teacher that we're engaging with, because they're all done through school, to say, hey, there was somebody who identified as a 15-year-old female who told us this information as a disclosure sort of thing. Is there any way that you're able to follow up? And most of the time we've had people go, oh yeah, I'm pretty sure I know who that is, I'll have a bit of a chat. And that's as much as we can do, and it's really only if it's things that are really the kind of serious things. So that's,
yeah, and it's a borderline of they've shared things knowing that it was going to be anonymous, but if it is worrying enough that we think we have to go back and reach out to the school, we do that. If it's, yeah, and we really do have a disclaimer in the at the end saying, if you've told us something that's particularly worrying, we will have to reach out. And when we do face-to-face, we are more likely to hear face-to-face young people disclose things, and we have a whole protocol around the ethics of how we deal with that and how we support them with pastoral care after.
Yeah. And at the end of the survey, that goes to a page saying, if anything worried you, then these are some different links you can go to with a couple of different sites, or to talk to an adult, or your parent or an adult that you trust about this. So that's about as much as we go to.
I'm just seeing there's oops, I don't know why I just touched there.
We've answered. They've been, I think it's magic. There's elves in the background.
Yeah. It seems that relationships were a big priority for children that responded. How can we help to elevate the importance of these relationships within the community and government? Fantastic question. I think that no matter, when we go out and talk to children and young people and we ask them, what's important to you, regardless if we're talking about school, we're talking about climate change, whatever, and we say, what's most important? They talk about relationships, and they talk about belonging, connection, and the need to be accepted, respected, connected. And that's a real key thing. So I think one of the things that you could do to support that is really about involving and empowering them and asking them and supporting them and their family and decisions about them. So ensuring that they actually get the ask, what would they like, and following through with those things, and involving the solutions, not just about them, but including their family and whānau in what solutions and discussion of the things that you're doing to support them. Young people have told us over and over again, like, I can't be good unless my family is good. So having that wider view of not just doing things for the young person, but doing it within the context of their whānau.
And I think that links in really well. I can just see in the chat that Dwayne asked the question saying, how does this connect with government's child and youth wellbeing strategy as well as the youth plan? So what makes a good life engagement that we alluded to before, in which those elements of wellbeing questions came to, were created originally to help inform the development of the child and youth wellbeing strategy. And it was a big part of that engagement that we were hearing a lot that relationships are really important. We want to feel loved, and we want to, yeah, like Donna was saying, you know, if our family is good, then we're good. And so it was part of that, that child and youth voice from that engagement that actually ended up with those areas 5 and 6 of the child and youth wellbeing strategy, I think, being as strong as they are, and including, so that's that involved and empowered and respected and connected, and also that in, rather than just being looking at physical safety of the child, it also looks at the that they're in a loving, safe home. And so there's that difference in connection. And so I think it's just still pushing that even though something is hard to measure, it's really important. And just because it's hard to measure doesn't mean we shouldn't be trying to look for ways that we can measure it. So that's, I think, where the support from the youth groups that participated is really important. And that's kind of things that you guys can help with, I guess, if the question is specifically, how can we help? Oh.
Is there appetite from Ministry of Education for results about school? What's the strategy for advocating reform for education and learning from home viable for all these children who said they benefit from it? I guess right now the appetite from Ministry of Education to actually listen to student voice has never been so high. Now, what the challenge is how they factor that into their decision making, because right now they've been hearing it and we're yet to see where the decisions start to land, that whether that what direction that they'll embed that in. So of all the time that I've worked in this space, the last couple of years have been the most positive in the Ministry of Ed as far as listening to children, young people, and factoring that into things. Now, we're doing a project with them right now where we're partnering on it and going out to 5 different schools that we've selected as being, I guess, sort of case studies about where good is happening, instead of going and trying to look at a problem more, actually looking where you have a good learning environment where children are accepted, respected, feel they belong, are happy, turn up every day, do great in their learning. And so that's opening the door for them to consider what is it about those environments that help children learn better. And we've certainly been having the discussion about the flexibility that children and young people are asking for with the boards of trustees. So it's an early conversation, and I think that some colleges have jumped online since COVID, and some colleges have said their senior year 11 and to 13 students could choose to do like 1 day a week at home if they wanted to for the remainder of the year. So we're hearing of good things that have happened where schools are actually trying different things. That's a good thing. Any other questions there, or what's on the cards for OCC in 2021? Wow. Well, first of all, I have to do a blatant advertisement for this report. So that's this is what, yes, yep. This is what you look for online.
Yep. Shannon's put the link in the chat, which is very appreciated.
Thank you, Shannon. It's been a really busy year, and it's been a year like no other, like I'd say, for many of us. And the first thing we're all going to do is take a breath. We're looking at having some different strategic priorities coming forward. The biggest change that we've had in our office is just 3 weeks ago, we've had an assistant Māori commissioner start. And that model and that direction of having senior Māori leadership attached with the commissioner in our office is new for us, and we're looking to how do we leverage that and make sure that we truly can be a voice for tamariki and rangatahi Māori, and make sure that as we speak in ways that actually resonate and are effective for them in the space. So that will certainly be a direction that we're going to in 2021.
This afternoon, 2nd of December, when we launched the Child Poverty Monitor report for 2020. So that's a series of measures to measure child poverty in New Zealand. It started about 12 years ago. Because there was 8?
2012.
Yeah, sorry. because there were no measures that the government had to measure child poverty. So this was a collaboration between the Office of the Children's Commissioner, the J.R. Mackenzie Trust, and the Otago University Epidemiology and Children Families Group. Is it? I'm
Close.
just close, yeah.
Yeah.
And this is, so now there is legislation which mandates the monitoring of certain measures for child poverty, which is new and it's great. And now it's looking at what more needs to be done. So this afternoon, we've got an event at Parliament with a panel of experts, and there's going to be questions coming from the floor and from the very front of the floor, which is a four groups of young people from 4 different areas who have had a bit of an interest in this sort of topic for a while. And so they've created some pretty amazing questions that they're going to be asking those experts, including the Minister for Children, Kelvin Davis. And so I think that's a good example, I guess, of the way that of amplifying children's voice and encouraging people to listen to what children and young people have to say, and that they've got pretty incredible things and questions, things to say and questions when you're listening.
All right.
Yeah. And
Shauna, is there any other questions that we missed or anything you want to add?
No, I think that you have covered the bases. Perhaps maybe just where do people go to access all of your awesome reports and knowledge and mahi? Chuck that in there.
Yeah, well, certainly we try to open source everything. So everything that we have as far as any reports we do, we put up online. We know that trying to access things on other people's website is often a challenge. But if you go onto our website, one thing there is a tab that's called Listening to Kids. And that under that tab will give you lots of different resources about why you should engage, how you could go about it, different methods, and different, I guess, pointers along the way to ensure that you do as good a practice you can while you're engaging in that. We also, any of our publications, if you go under the publications tab and just, search by a keyword, or even just scroll through and look what was recent, you'll find some great stuff, both from what we've done in the My World team, which is our Voices of Children and Young People work, but also across the office and some of our submissions. I guess that's the other answer to the what's on the cards for us for 2021 is we're continuing to want to grow and expand our work in the My World team so that, while we're able to do an engagement and in a survey like this or face-to-face engagement, maybe 1 or 2 a year with children, young people, we're looking to expand that and also for that to be much more of a resource for people, I guess, a center for excellence or a hub to say, where they could go and say, who else has asked these kinds of questions? What have they said? Where do I get the information? What do I know about, are there any training opportunities in that? So that's on the cards for what we would like to do. And we're looking to expand and hopefully to support people to, when you're engaging with children and young people and you hear those views, how to amplify them and how to share them within your community, to your local government, or other organizations that provide services and support to the young people you work with, so that you actually take on board some of the views that you hear yourselves.
Well, that was epic. Like, I really appreciated your time. What I love especially is hearing the whakaaro from our young people, and I love how you amplify that. I think we've left some really good links to your mahi, and also we know that it's a jam-packed day for you. So I wanted to thank you for your time and also let you know that the mahi that you're doing is really inspiring a lot of us on the ground. So thank you, Donna. Thank you, Emma, for being here. Thank you, peeps, for tuning up. This was recorded, so we'll package it and distribute the link out there. But I think maybe I can just end our time with a karakia and then let everybody be off on their way, including you two who are going to be up at Parliament soon. Gathering. Okay. Ka inoi tātou, kia whakairia te tapu, kia wātia ai te ara, kia turuki whakataha ai, kia turuki whakataha ai, Haumea huie tai.
Yeah.
Kia ora, thank you so much, and all the best for this evening. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. See you here in a fortnight, and that information will go out on our Facebook page.
Great, thank you so much for having us. Ka kite.